From the New Arts and Media Studios here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Well, today, as is the case every day, there was news and headlines and big things to follow and big stories to worry about. And every day for the last, 30, 40, 50 years, every day has been the same. The environment, climate change, climate crisis, always one of those stories, but pretty much, with very few exceptions, it gets pushed off the front page for the excitement of the day, because there's always something a little more pressing, something a little more exciting. So I thought what I'd do today is just sort of scan the headlines of the last few weeks. Typically, if I see a headline that I feel is important in one way or another regarding climate, I'll save it, put it in a file, and I'd like to make this commitment. You can hold me to it once in a while, at least. Maybe we should do this even just once a week. Maybe we should commit to that. We'll devote a half an hour to these stories. So, in no particular order here, there's some good news and there's some bad news. Oliver Millman reporting for The Guardian. Air pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels such as coal and oil was responsible for, hold on to something here, 8.7 million deaths globally in 2018. A staggering 1 in 5 of all people who died that year, according to new research. Countries with the most prodigious consumption of fossil fuels to power factories, homes, and vehicles are suffering the highest death tolls, with the study finding more than 1 in 10 deaths in both the U.S. and Europe were caused by the resulting pollution, along with nearly a third of deaths in Eastern Asia, which includes China. Death rates in South America and Africa were significantly lower. So here's a case of a research study, at least in this area, confirming what common sense will tell you. Well, of course, the more developed nations, more industry, more cars, etc., are going to have higher rates. But this number is just staggering. 1 in 5 of all people who died in a single year were victims of air pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels. That is just a staggering number, and a number that maybe you should remind your representative in Congress to take note of. Maybe we should share this information with our elected representatives. When Joe Biden came into office, he was roundly criticized by the other side of the aisle for his stated goals of ending the use of fossil fuels entirely. He didn't say tomorrow, but he did say at some point, sooner rather than later, we have to move on to what's next. The internal combustion engine and the burning of coal for electricity have to come to an end. And so he announced initiatives like an all-electric vehicle fleet for the federal government. That's something he can do with a stroke of a pen. It takes a little more legislative heft to force the private sector to do anything. But while these conservative right-wing dinosaurs were all up in arms about protecting jobs and to them the undisputed fact that gas and oil are just part of the picture and they're going to be and they don't want to put a timetable, they don't want to talk about that, for the indefinite future. They don't want to even entertain the notion that at least, you can't even get them to say that at least, someday in the future, you don't have to put a date on it, someday gas and oil have to be a thing of the past. They won't even go that far. I'll go to my grave being completely befuddled by the right wing. I mean, there are these easy answers that, big gas and oil, fossil fuel money, they rely on that. And they've got coal miners in Virginia, and they got drill diggers in Texas in their base. They have to make them happy. I mean, those are the easy answers. But that is such a dwindling, shrinking, it's the great shrinking argument. How long are they going to stick with this? Coal miners in Virginia, regardless of political debates, are in a dying, archaic industry. And at some point, it's just going to go away like whale oil did. We're not having big fights about whale oil, are we? Are coastal senators standing up on the Senate floor saying, we must protect the interests of our great whale hunters? No, of course. It's just history. It just happens. Now, because of what we know about fossil fuels and what we know about the climate crisis, we absolutely have to hasten this evolution. But even if we didn't, it's in the cards anyway. So I don't understand right-wingers. It's in your own interest. It's in everybody's interest, including your interest. Private industry understands this. Right about that same time when Joe was fighting with the right wing about this stuff, by the way, he was winning, which is a nice little change of pace. General Motors announced that they're going to be all electric by 2035. You guys realize that's not real far away. I'm still going to be a relatively young man. Relatively being the key word. This is not some far-off, distant, futuristic Jetsons kind of a date here. This is 2035. Private industry understands for their own survival. Because they don't give a crap about anybody. They don't care about anything except their bottom line and their investors. And so when they look at the situation from their point of view, they see the writing on the wall. Why can't you? Conservatives, right-wingers, fossil fuel, gas, oil, coal, the greatest polluters, have to go at some point. They just have to. They're going. The die is cast. So why not get on board politically, culturally, economically, and let's really make this happen. Let's push it. Why not? Is it pride at this point? Is it just pride? You can't admit that your years, your decades of wedded bliss with the gas and oil industry, you just can't bear to give that up? It's just become a mindset that supersedes everything, even your own self-interest, even the interest of your constituents. Now, I'm going to jump on your side for a minute here. You're going to get my full backing on this. When workers building the XL pipeline are suddenly thrown out of work, or if coal miners suddenly lose their job, you're absolutely right to advocate for them. And I'm right there with you. I'm side by side, arm in arm, with the most right-wing conservatives there are. Yes, you should be fighting. We all should be fighting for these people. But your solution is just batty. You want to continue your whale hunt to get that precious whale blubber so we can all study by the glowing light of the whale oil lamp. You still want to produce buggy whips and spittoons. I mean, come on. Let's all get together and figure out how to help these people transition. And I have a lot of sympathy for those who say, well, what am I going to do? I'm 56 years old. This is all I've ever known. My dad was a coal miner. His dad was a coal miner. What are you going to do? Teach me how to code? I hear that argument, and I have complete sympathy for it. So here's where everybody, right, left, and center, just has to swallow hard and get on the same page. And surprise, surprise, it's going to be the lefty page. And that is, you just help people, just direct help. If you shut down a big old pipeline coming from Canada and 1,000 people are out of work, just send them damn checks. Make sure they're all right. Pay their damn bills. That is the biggest hurdle that moderates and conservatives just have to get over. It's really okay. There's no shame. Just take the damn money. And Congress, pass the legislation. Allocate the funds. If you're going to take away these jobs, help them out. And I don't want any of your Rube Goldberg 5,000-page bills full of tax credits and job training and tuition offsets and tax breaks for employers who hire out-of-work coal miners. Don't go through your regular old routine. It's ridiculous. This is where the Democrats just drive me up the entire wall. You create this bizarre Rubik's Cube of legislation. You always say how you don't believe in trickle down, but most of your money winds up going to the elites And they're the ones you're giving tax breaks, and oh, okay, well, if you hire so and you give such and such a training, well, we'll give you a tax break on blah 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 in the tax code 4AB 368. Come on, Democrats, they drive me nuts. Democrats drive me nuts. Now, it gets very complicated. I'm the first one to admit it. I know very little to nothing about the international rules of the road when it comes to this stuff. But I do know that big things have to happen on an international scale. I've spoken often about my personal goal, just to tread lightly on the earth. If I can't save the world, at least I don't want to contribute to its ills. So I'm an anti-consumer. You and I have talked about this before. But I am not naive enough to believe for 1 second that our little personal individual choices have anywhere near the impact of the decisions made by governments and multinational corporations on a global scale. It has to be big. So woe is me if I get all satisfied with myself. Oh, look what a good person I am. I don't buy anything. I'm not contributing to the problem. That's a bunch of BS. If I'm not harping on my representatives every day, if I'm not out with Greta Thunberg, hitting the streets, making with the disruptive, peaceful protests, getting into some good trouble. I mean, the numbers from this study are just grim. Of all deaths in children aged 5 and under in Europe caused by lower respiratory infection, almost 14% are attributable to fossil fuels. This is preventable suffering and death. So good for GM for going all electric. Of course, we still need electricity. So I'm always one to advocate for thinking an awful lot bigger than that. A lot more public transportation, a lot less private, and full support, technical, financial, and otherwise, institutional support, government support for new technologies. I don't want to join that camp of just saying, oh, well, new technologies will save us. No, you can't. Anybody who falls into that line of thinking is just a chump. Sure, it's part of the puzzle. Of course it is. It's a very important part of the whole equation, new technologies. But just to rely on them as a panacea, yeah, we can't go down that road. I mentioned Greta Thunberg a minute ago. She spoke at the recent Davos meeting, that annual event. Quote, "I'm only here to once again remind you of the emergency we are in." If nothing else, if she does nothing else, she reminds us on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis with her Friday strikes. Every Friday, she reminds the world that yes, we are in an emergency, and we ought to be acting like it. I'm only here to once again remind you of the emergency we are in, the crisis that you and your predecessors have created and inflicted upon us. We understand that the world is very complex and that change doesn't happen overnight. But you've now had more than 3 decades of blah, blah, blah. How many more do you need? A short quote there from her address to the World Economic Forum. I try very hard not to make heroes out of anybody. I don't do hero worship. Everybody has their own flaws and their own foibles, and sometimes they really disappoint us. And typically I don't try to have heroes. But I will say that we should emulate Greta in this way. We can't all be climate scientists. We can't all be full-time protesters and activists. We have lives, we have professions, we have families. I understand that. But I think where we should emulate Greta is wherever you are in your life, on your journey, take a little time. Take a little time every day. And maybe devote a little more time once a week, like she does with her Friday demonstrations. So, yeah, we don't have to sanctify Greta. We don't have to put her on a pedestal. She doesn't have to be this grand hero. But I say good work, and I say, yeah, let's emulate Greta in that way. Let's have the good sense to see what's right in front of our eyes and demand a better future for ourselves and for our children. We're just taking a look today at some of the articles I've saved over the last couple of months here regarding climate. Again, in the bad news category, in a succinct new video released Thursday. This is from a while ago, a couple of months. NASA announced that 2020 tied 2016 for the warmest year on record. Importantly, the science agency underscored this warning is part of a stark trend largely caused by heat-trapping greenhouse gases amassing in the atmosphere. The last decade was the warmest decade on record, said NASA. The agency's modern temperature records go back well over a century to 1880. And in the last 40 years, Earth's temperature rise has been accelerating. Even after the Kyoto Protocol and after the Paris Agreement, all these long-range goals, but still year after year after blessed year, we're breaking records. I can understand how you might get a little depressed about this, but better yet, let's just get a little fight in us. And at the very least, can we put it at the top of our attention every once in a while? Even though the grand theater of politics continues every day, and there's always something weird and exciting happening in the world, in the news cycle. But again, climate, it's always in the top 3 or 4, but it always drops. Never gets that one spot. I'll be damned if I'm just ready to roll over on this. Here's something from the good news file. Headline: Many scientists now say global warming could stop relatively quickly after emissions go to zero. That's one of several recent conclusions about climate change that came more sharply into focus in the last year. This is from Inside Climate News. Writer Bob Berwin. Berwin. Are you a Svengoolie fan? I just made some of you smile ear to ear, and others just cock your heads, go, "What? Who?" Berwin. All right, yeah, look up Svengoolie. Let me read a little bit of this to you. Parts of the world economy may have been on pause during 2020, dampening greenhouse gas emissions for a while. But that didn't slow the overall buildup of atmospheric carbon dioxide, which reached its highest level in millions of years. I know this doesn't sound like good news yet, but stay with me. If anything, research during the year showed global warming is accelerating. Symptoms of the fever include off-the-charts heat waves on land and in the oceans, and a hyperactive and destructive Atlantic hurricane season. I know, I'm getting to the good news. And through November, the last year was on pace to end up as either the hottest or second hottest on record for the planet, almost 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial times, inching closer to that 1.5 degree limit set by the Paris Climate Agreement. Here are 5 aspects of climate change that were new and unexpected in 2020. We had the La Niña effect, which normally would have been a cooling phase, but the heating continued even through that. There's the polar breakdown, as they call it. Warming in the Arctic and Antarctic continues to accelerate faster than the global average. Sea levels continue to rise. There's the issue of climate justice, especially when it comes to sea levels. Wealthy parts of the world will be able to adapt. Others obviously won't. We've already seen this in action. But now here's the good news I promised. I know we really made you wait for it here. But this is what gets the headline. Some scientists, I'm reading again here, some scientists punctuate their alarming warnings with hopeful messages because they know that the worst possible outcome is avoidable. Recent research shows that stopping greenhouse gas emissions will break the vicious cycle of warming temperatures, melting ice, wildfire, and rising sea levels faster than expected just a few years ago. There is less warming in the pipeline than we thought, according to Imperial College London climate scientists. It is our best understanding that if we bring down CO2 to net zero, the warming will level off. The climate will stabilize within a decade or two. There will be very little to no additional warming. Our best estimate is 0. So that's good news. It's new. This is a new development. We can still do this. Reading again. The widespread idea that decades or even centuries of additional warming are already baked into the system, as suggested by previous IPCC reports, were based on an unfortunate misunderstanding of experiments done with climate models that never assumed zero emissions. Those models assumed that concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere would remain constant, that it would take centuries before they decline, said Penn State climate scientist Michael Mann. The idea that global warming could stop relatively quickly after emissions go to zero was described as a game-changing new scientific understanding. This really is true. It's a dramatic change in the paradigm that has been lost on many who cover this issue, perhaps because it hasn't been well explained by the scientific community. It's an important development that is still underappreciated. It's definitely the scientific consensus now that warming stabilizes quickly within 10 years of emissions going to zero. That is the best thing I've read in a very long time. Now we just have to get emissions to zero. And I know that sounds like a big lift, but what are our options? We have to fight for this. There are examples. You may have seen the news recently. Bhutan has been in the news. The only carbon negative country in the world. Not just because the citizens recycle their Pepsi bottles. No, the government of Bhutan has made a commitment to conserving its environment. Bhutan made the news a few years ago when they started basing their decisions on the so-called gross national happiness, the GNH index. You remember those stories? Yeah. This is a really great case study. It's a lesson for all of us. So when you measure your success by the health and happiness of the people in your country, rather than profit, rather than GDP, you wind up making different decisions. And now as a result of their putting emphasis not on money, but on happiness, they're the first and only carbon negative country in the world. It can be done. It can be done. Which brings me to another kind of provocative headline that I happened to catch recently. We need a new climate narrative, not a dystopian movie, but a vision of hope, change, and empowerment. In a season of fire and storm, we need more than fables of apocalypse. There's real hope if we can seize it. Jeff Biggers, writing for Salon. He says we need to get beyond wake-up call approaches in the media and set out a game plan to bolster the needed public support to bring about urgent climate action on a policy level. Yes, that's exactly right. And I don't want to be someone to, just another voice on your radio saying that, we need a wake-up call. We just need to talk about this. We just need to make people aware. That's all well and good, but we are so past that. Each and every one of us has to take this as a personal call to action with an urgency and with an understanding that it takes the kind of global policy initiatives I've been talking about. I think that's why the Green New Deal got people so excited, because if you saw the initial reporting on that, and AOC made that little video, and she and Markey came out with a pretty good bullet point plan. None of it carved in stone. It wasn't like ALEC gets together and actually writes legislation. No, it wasn't like that. It was a new way of looking. It was a new story, but with real tangible suggestions, proposals, a new vision of a new possibility. I think that's why the Green New Deal just really lit a lot of people's imaginations. So Biggers is talking here about how we should approach it, how we should tell the story. Quote, "This process is not about terrifying people with apocalyptic images, but bringing them into the loop with stories, starting with people on the front lines of environmental ruin and injustice who are struggling for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And I would add success stories like the one from Bhutan. Sure, there's plenty of room for righteous indignation, for righteous anger. When Greta Thunberg gets that steely-eyed stare in her eyes and she just sends daggers to world leaders. Yeah, there's plenty of room for that too. But the fact is, this fight is not lost. We are not doomed. The future is not set in stone here. As Scrooge said to the ghost of Christmas future, are these visions of what must be, or are these visions of what might be? But Spirit, it's too late for me. But then he finds out, no, it's not. It's not too late. It's not too late for us. So let's make an effort. Let's make an effort to keep climate. I'll do another. While I'm on the Scrooge metaphor, here, this works pretty good. As Scrooge kept Christmas throughout the year, and nobody personified it better than he. Let's keep climate in our hearts every day, not just on School Strike Fridays, not just on Earth Day in April. Let's keep climate in our minds, our hearts every day. Let's keep it on our lips as we voice the demands. You know, when East Asia, especially China, is right at the top of the list of polluters, you know, this is not easy. We Americans have a very special place, though, on this planet. We are still the citizens of a very powerful world government. So let's take advantage of that. And my last word on the subject, I'm going to share this article on the Charles Purcell Facebook page. I was scrolling around and actually found this. This is from June of 2019, so it's not a current article. It's by Darna Noor, who is a climate journalist, and she writes on a new report. It says that human action is driving 1 million plant and animal species to extinction, but it's not just any human action. It's the choice of a tiny minority of wealthy and powerful people. It's about that tiny minority of wealthy that exploit not only nature, but exploit people. She makes the point that capitalism is the cancer. And you might be going, oh, okay, Charles Purcell, you got to go there. Well, yeah, I do have to go there. I won't go into full detail, but you can just imagine what I would say anyway, right? If it's all about the bottom line, if it's all about money, then yeah, people are going to be exploited, workers are exploited, the earth is exploited. As long as the driving force of every aspect of our life is working and earning and spending and working and earning and spending and then dying. You don't need me to go through all that again. It's my mantra. It's my go-to. But this writer makes the point, and again, I'll share it. I'd like you to read it. That if you want to do anything, we all must advocate for a post-capitalist world. The title of this article that I'm going to share, Socialism or Extinction. And I'm going to spare you my ranting. This is my gift to you today. I'm going to spare you my ranting on the evils of capitalism and a profit-centered system. But I'm also going to tell you that's where I'm landing today, and I'm going to send you to my Facebook page, and I'd like you to read this. All right, there's our climate half hour. Let's make it a lot more than that, shall we? Let's revisit this regularly. Let's all make the commitment to keep it at the front of our minds and of our activity, both personal and political. All right? Okay. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.